Hey shooters, welcome back to the Shooters Resource Channel. Today we're going to do a caliber profile of the 6.5 Grendel. It's become one of my favorite cartridges in the AR-15 platform, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why. But before we do, go ahead and take a second. Hit that like and subscribe button, support the channel. Thank you guys. Now you might be wondering, why waste my time with the 6.5 Grendel? There are a lot of other rounds out there for the AR-15, and some of them are more popular than others. A common term that's used with the 6.5 Grendel is it's very efficient. So what does that mean? Let's look at some of the ballistic data behind the round versus some of the traditional rounds, and then let's also compare it to some of the new rounds, like the really popular 300 Blackout, the 224 Valkyrie, as well as the 6.8 SPC. And we'll see how the 6.5 Grendel fares out and why I chose it for a long-range AR-15 platform. All right, let's compare the 6.5 Grendel versus traditional cartridges in terms of terminal energy. And you can see that the 308 with a 180 grain bullet definitely outperforms the 6.5 Grendel. However, the gap closes quite a bit as you go further out in distance. And you would find that as you reduce the weight of the 308 Winchester round, that gap narrows quite a bit. And the Grendel actually starts to outperform the 308 close to 800, 900,000 yards if you're using 150 grain or 147 grain 308 bullet. The 6.5 Grendel beats out the Valkyrie in terms of terminal energy, though the gap narrows as you go out further in distance. If you went to 130 grain 6.5 Grendel, it's able to hold its own a little better further out at distance. And you might be wondering, hey, why are we worried so much about numbers that if I shoot, something, an animal, it's not going to know the difference between the round or so on and so forth. But I'll explain to you a little bit why I find the numbers are interesting and why I find them important, and I use them for selecting the right roll for the cartridge. 1,000 foot-pounds of energy is commonly referred to as kind of the minimum amount of energy you need to take down medium to large size game. And what I find is if you get much lower than that, you start ending up with situations where you don't get exit wounds on animals if you're hitting bone or things of that nature. So there's no steadfast rule. I mean, obviously you can get a through and through shot with a 9mm pistol on a deer if you hit them in the right place. However, that's a lot less practical if you're 100 yards away and you're trying to shoot them through both shoulders, or you hit a rib or something like that. Now you start running into the chance that you might not get an exit wound. And it's the same with these rifle cartridges as well. So for instance, the 5.56 NATO. I've done a lot of hunting with my AR-15s chambered in 5.56, and I've shot and killed deer with it. My son, JW, who's often on the channel, he's harvested his very first doe with AR-15 with 5.56 NATO, and he dropped her at 75 yards broadside. However, there wasn't an exit wound. And I've shot a buck at 35 yards broadside, no exit wound. He ran into the woods where I couldn't see where he went. But for me, because I didn't see where he went, I didn't hear him crash, I didn't know if he was a quarter mile down the road or right under my feet. And luckily, I ended up just stumbling across him by happenstance because there was no exit wound. So you just have to be cognizant of these things. It's not that you couldn't kill a deer at 600 yards with your favorite AR-15 chambered in 5.56 NATO. You've got to recognize and have some reference for what you're actually hitting them with. So like a 22 long rifle, for instance, there are 22 long rifle cartridges with 160 foot-pounds of energy, and you can see at 700 yards, that's what the 5.56 NATO has. So, I mean, you're essentially out past 600 yards. You've dropped to 22 long rifle energy levels. And so, yes, you can kill a deer, or, yes, it could be effective. In some situations, you can punch paper with it. However, it's probably not ideal to shoot that trophy buck that you've been trying to get for the last couple of years. So that's where you need to understand the benefits. It's all about what do you plan to use the cartridge for. But you need to understand when you do select a cartridge what it's capable of doing. And so energy numbers help you with that. As I pointed out in the charts, the 6.5 Grendel does carry that energy level out a little further than the other AR-15 counterparts. And we can look at the velocities now too, because bullet drop and velocity definitely goes hand in hand. So another good rule of thumb used in the gun world in terms of a cartridge's range is when does it cross back over through the sound barrier. So that's called a bullet going transonic. And what transonic means is that bullet's had so much drag because it's cutting through the air that it's losing momentum over time, which is why it reduces in speed, and eventually it drops below the sound barrier. So the problem is in that transonic state, it drastically impacts the flight of the bullet. It destabilizes it, and it can make it fly erratically. Now, there are, folks that are really into shooting, and they've developed cartridges and rifles and stuff like that, and they're able to shoot 308s out 1.5 miles. This is like with any rule, there are exceptions. However, a good rule of thumb is you look at a cartridge's effective range for the ability to maintain accuracy by looking at what point does it break back through the sound barrier. And so that happens somewhere around 1,100 feet per second. There's a range, right? It could be 1,200 feet per second. It could be, less than 1,100 feet per second. But 1,100 is a good rule of thumb. So as you look across the different rounds, you can see that the Grendel, the 308, and the Valkyrie all maintain above 1,100 feet per second out past 1,000 yards, which is why a lot of people are interested in the Valkyrie and the 6.5 Grendel, because on the AR platform now you can stretch it out to 1,000 yards and maintain accuracy with the right barrel lengths and all the other requirements that go along with it. And so you can see when you couple that with the energy numbers there, why the 6.5 Grendel is appealing. You can also see why the 224 Valkyrie is appealing. And the same, there are benefits that the 6.8 and the 300 Blackout carry as well. If you guys haven't already, go ahead and check out the 6.5 Grendel cartridge. Look at it. They've got some bolt guns. They've got some Kalashnikovs that are chambered in it. It's based on the AK-47 round, and it's an inherently accurate cartridge. If you guys enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.